Greetings. Don't know if we have room for all this crowd. Standing room only. You going to stand the whole time? Does anybody need an outline? I have one left. Finishing up what we started last week. Hopefully finishing up. I think we can. Maybe we'll get done early. But if that doesn't mean we get to start church service early and then eat early. It's just, we just go eat. There we go. We can go nibble before service. As long as you don't touch the turkey yet. Don't need anybody sleeping. Don't need any help with that. All right. We're going to be in Leviticus, getting into chapter 16. Leviticus 16, everybody's favorite book in the Bible. When everyone races to on their Bible reading schedule. It's white out there. We'll get there. If the Lord tarries long enough, we will get there. Yep. All right. Leviticus 16. Let's go ahead and pray, and we'll get started this morning. Father, thank you for your goodness to us, and thank you for your word. Please help us as we study this morning. Help us as we learn from it. And Lord, I pray that you'd help us to see how these things point to Jesus. And I pray that you'd bless our time. And Lord, I pray that for those that are still traveling in this morning, that you'd give them safety as they come. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so again, just real quick review. We've, in Leviticus here, it's divided into two main sections. The first section is dealing with how we approach God in the first 16 chapters. And the first 16 chapters primarily are focusing in on sacrifices. That's how we approach God. And we have to be made pure. And then, and so the first really 7 chapters are all about the sacrifices. Then we get to dealing with the priesthood in chapters 8, 9, and 10. And then chapters 11 through 15 is all about purification. And the Lord goes through and deals with what is clean and unclean. And so not only does he deal with the animals being clean and unclean and having certain dietary restrictions for the people of Israel, but also people under various circumstances and things under various circumstances can become unclean. And so we looked at that just briefly last week. Getting into chapter 12 through 15, here we have in chapter 12 with childbirth, a woman was unclean after she gave birth to a child. For if it was a man-child, it's going to be a little over a month. If it's a girl, then she's unclean twice as long. I'm not exactly sure why that is, except for maybe to potentially reduce the number of women, because I think women generally outnumber men in any society, and so it's just kind of a way to keep the population balanced, perhaps, I don't know. But she was unclean twice as long, and after a certain period of time, then she was considered clean, and then she was to bring a sacrifice of some kind to the tabernacle. Chapters 13 and 14 then deal with the issue of leprosy, both in people and in things. And leprosy was used much broader. The word leprosy simply means white. When Moses was there in the mountain with God, when he was speaking to him from the burning bush, and he's getting ready to commission him to send him in, he tells Moses, stick out your hand, and it says leprous as snow. And so the idea of leprosy is just meaning a whiteness. And so it could be in a person that they have actual leprosy, in which their skin and their tissue and various things like that are beginning to deteriorate and to rot away and various things like that. Or a person could simply have a boil that is coming to a head, and that would be considered leprosy, and they're put away for a period of time just to make sure that that's all that it is. And then after a certain period of time, they were to be examined, and if it's gone down, or whatever, or not any deeper into the skin, then they were considered to be clean. It's some sort of a sore. A guy that's kind of becoming follically few on the top, if he gets a sore on his head, it's considered a leprosy. And so they were to be put away shut up for a period of time until it's examined to make sure that it is only just a sore of some kind and not something that's going to get other people sick. And that's largely what they had to deal with. A person's clothes could become leprous if it gets mildew on it. That's kind of how they looked at it. This is a leprosy. Or a person's house, if sometimes the weather changes and things get a little too damp, and so a little mold begins to creep in certain places, that was considered a leprosy. And so it was to be shut up, and then if it was able to dry and go away after a period of time, then it was okay. But then if they were to examine it and it goes deeper than the surface level, then the entire house was to be condemned and torn down and a new one built in its place, just to prevent sickness and illness from spreading. That was a big thing in Israel. It's also one of the reasons during the time of the bubonic plague, the Jews were actually blamed for the bubonic plague in different parts of Europe, because the Jews did not have a problem with the bubonic plague spreading to them as much, because they were such clean freaks, in a sense. God had given them this law, if somebody's sick, you put them away and you keep them isolated for a period of time until they're better. And you wash up, you use running water, you clean things, you get rid of blood and all this other stuff. Well, that's not the way the rest of Europe was, and so when everybody's getting sick and dying and the Jews are doing just fine, they're like, well, it must be those pesky Jews, this is their fault. But it wasn't. It's just they didn't have the problem with it because they followed the laws of cleanness. And then there was different bodily discharges in chapter 15. Now, one of the things that we learned, and we mentioned last week, is that these issues of purity, these clean and unclean things, what they show, especially with childbirth, leprosy, and bodily discharges, is that whatever comes from man is unclean. Man can only produce uncleanness. That's the point. A child coming from its mother is still a sinner. It's, we look at the baby, like, oh, it's just this perfect little baby, and they're just so wonderful and innocent, and they would never do anything wrong. Well, it's just a matter of opportunity is all. That's the only issue. They're vipers and diapers is a good way to put it, because that's exactly what they are. When it comes to leprosy, let's look over. I'm doing this on the spot. I meant to write it down and forgot. Let's go to Isaiah 1. Isaiah chapter 1. Keep your place here. We're coming right back to Leviticus. But Isaiah chapter 1. God uses this imagery of leprosy to describe as an illustration of human sinfulness. Yeah. So Isaiah chapter 1, verse 4. Well, let's back up. Verse 2. Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for the Lord hath spoken. I have nourished and brought up children, and they have rebelled against me. The ox knoweth his owner, and the ass his master's crib. But Israel doth not know, my people doth not consider. Ah, sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children that are corrupters. They have forsaken the Lord. They have provoked the Holy One of Israel unto anger. They are gone away backward. Why should ye be stricken any more? Ye will revolt more and more. And basically what he's saying is, why would I continue to chastise you? You're not going to learn from it. I'm sure none of you have had to do that with your kids. It's just like, oh my word. What's the point of doing this? They're just going to go right back and do it. Maybe hard knocks is just the best way for them to learn this. And that's basically what God's saying there. Why should you be stricken anymore? Why should I spank you anymore, essentially? You'll revolt more and more. And this is what he says. The whole head is sick and the whole heart faint. From the sole of the foot even unto the head there is no soundness in it, but wounds and bruises and putrefying sores. They have not been closed, neither bound up, neither mollified with ointment. And then he goes on to describe some of the desolations there. And then I think it's Jeremiah. No, it's Isaiah. Anyway, that we are all as an unclean thing, and all our righteousnesses are as filthy rags. And that's the idea there. We are like a leper, an unclean thing, and our righteousnesses, our good works, are like the filthy rags that they would take and they would wipe out and clean out those oozing, pussy sores. That's what our righteousness, our good works are to God. And so that's what he's describing there. So leprosy is a picture of sin. That's why there was such sternness with keeping it isolated and keeping them away from the people. And then the bodily discharges. So again, anything that's coming from man himself, anything coming from man is sinful, it's tainted, it's unclean. And so that then brings us to chapter 16, which deals with the remedy for this. It is where atonement is made for man's sinfulness. And we'll just quickly go over this again. Last week we mentioned the word atonement, it simply means to cover. It's a word primarily for the Old Testament. It appears only once in the New Testament, in Romans chapter 5. But the idea of atonement means to cover and to make reconciliation. That's what the word itself, the English word, means. It means to be at one meant. Be at one again. And so what was taking place with the sacrifices, especially on the Day of Atonement, is the Lord is looking forward to the fact that Jesus Christ is going to come and he forgives the sins of his people based upon what he is going to do. So it's kind of, in essence, on credit. And so he takes the debt, pushes it forward another year, year after year, until Christ finally comes, and Christ then, when he dies on the cross, pays for the sins that are past, Romans 5 tells us, and he declares his righteousness at this present time as a result of his sacrifice on the cross. And so, let's look here now, chapter 16, verse 1 again. It says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they offered before the Lord and died." Now you remember, the two sons of Aaron, they took fire, they made fire, put incense on it to offer before the Lord, and the Lord had not given them instructions on that. They had acted on their own behalf, kind of came up with their own idea how they're going to serve the Lord in this matter, and the Lord killed them as a result of this. And essentially what this is saying to the children of Israel, especially the priests, is this matter of atonement, this sacrifice and this ritual, you have to get it right. You cannot do this any other way, or it is going to result in death. That's the issue here. Now, the Day of Atonement, notice here on page 2, if you have your notes, page 2, the Day of Atonement was the one day of the year that the priest, the high priest, could go into the Holy of Holies. So you remember the tabernacle had basically 3 parts to it. You'd come in through the gate of the tabernacle, the door, and that's where the sacrifice would be made. And then you would move in from there into the courtyard of the tabernacle and later the temple. And in that courtyard, you had basically the butcher blocks, because the priests functioned as the local butchers, and they would chop up and prepare the sacrifice. And then you'd have the altar in which the sacrifice would be burned on. Then you'd have the brazen laver in which the priest would go then and he would cleanse himself. And then he would go into the tabernacle or into the temple later. And that first large room in the tabernacle that had the table of showbread, the altar of incense, and the golden candlestick. And those parts, they went every day. Multiple times a day, they were going in and out of those areas, making sacrifices, offering incense, prayers for the people of Israel, acting on their behalf. But into the Holy of Holies, the next room, was the one place nobody was allowed to go except for one time a year. And that's where the Ark of the Covenant was. And the Ark of the Covenant, which on top of it was the mercy seat, and that's where God's presence would come down, and he would sit there on that mercy seat like a throne, and he would judge the nation of Israel. And so there was only one time a year God allowed them to come into that room, and they had to come with blood, and they also had to go in with incense, and the smoke from the incense would fill that room. That way they couldn't see inside there. They couldn't see the glory of God as he sat on the mercy seat. Now, the celebration of this day has great prophetic significance to the coming of Christ to die for the sins of mankind and to redeem Israel. So both things are being accomplished here. There's a picture of Christ's death for all of humanity, and there is a picture of Christ coming to redeem Israel. There it is again. Doesn't matter what I do. One of these days. I think it does it the most in the wintertime. I think it's because of the static that builds up from the heat in the cables for the sound system, and I just don't know what to do with it. Someday, get the demons out of there. And so the Day of Atonement reinforces the fact that man is separated from God and needs to be reconciled to him, and this reconciliation can only take place through the blood of Christ. Now let's look. We don't have the time. So this is what we'll do. Instead of reading through this whole thing, I would suggest doing it on your own. It is pretty cool to read through here. I went ahead and kind of outlined what takes place on this day. So there's 3 main sacrifices that's going to take place. There's going to be a bull that is brought, and there's going to be 2 goats that are brought. And what's going to take place is they're going to come, let me see here, let me just make sure. Okay, so they're going to bring the 2 goats in, bring the bull in. Now the bull is for the priest and his household. That's what this is. It's for his own personal cleansing. It's a sin offering on his behalf. And then the 2 goats are brought in. Those are going to be offered on behalf of the people for the rest of the nation. Now, what he's going to do is he's going to kind of roll the dice, so to speak, to figure out which of those 2 goats is going to be sacrificed. Because one is going to be sacrificed and the blood put on the mercy seat. The other goat is then later going to actually be released into the wilderness. And it's a picture for the people. And so what would happen is the priest would come in here in verse 4. The priest is going to come in. He's going to cleanse himself. He's going to get all cleaned up. He's going to put on new clothes, more humble, appropriate clothing for this work that he's about to do. And the high priest was required then to offer a sacrifice for his own sin and for the sin of his house. That was the very first thing he'd do. So he would sacrifice that bull. He would collect the blood. The bull was sacrificed. Then he would take that blood, after he cast the lots for the 2 goats, and determine which was going to be for the sacrifice. He would then take that blood that he collected for the bull. He would go into the tabernacle toward the Holy of Holies. And as he goes in, he's going to bring this live goat with him. This was really interesting. He's going to bring the live goat with him. He's going to burn incense then before the Ark of the Covenant. So he's going to slip the incense pan in there, let the room fill up with smoke to shield him from the glory of God. And then he's going to offer the blood of that bull upon the mercy seat. Then he's going to take, and in the tabernacle, he's going to kill that goat and do the same thing with the blood of that goat and put it on the mercy seat to atone for the sins of the people. Now, let's drop down here to verse number 18. Verse 18 says, "He shall go out unto the altar that is before the Lord, and make an atonement for it, and shall take the bullock, the blood of the bullock, the blood of the goat, and put it upon the horns of the altar round about, and he shall sprinkle of the blood upon it with his finger 7 times, and cleanse it, and hallow it from the uncleanness of the children of Israel." So what he does, he comes back out now out of the tabernacle, and he goes to the altar of sacrifice, the brazen altar, and he's going to make an atonement for that altar to cleanse it by placing blood on it. Okay, now notice here, at this point, the high priest has made the necessary sacrifice for himself, his family, the nation. He has gone into the Holy of Holies, and he's offered that blood on the mercy seat. He then appears a second time. So he's already before the children of Israel, before he goes into the tabernacle. Then when he comes back out, he's appearing before them a second time. Now that's very important, because the book of Hebrews is going to elaborate on this for us, to show us what this is all a picture of. Because he has already made atonement for his sins and the sins of the people inside the tabernacle. But then there's going to be a revelation of it when that, what's called the scapegoat, that goat is released then into the wilderness. And so he's going to sanctify the brazen altar, make known the forgiveness of sins through the scapegoat. Now the scapegoat, there in chapter 16 here, verse 20 to 22, was to be a picture for the people to see that their sin had been taken care of by the high priest in the tabernacle. Okay, so the sin for the people was already taken care of, but they did not see that take place. They had to have another illustration after the fact to make known to them, and that's what the scapegoat was for. And so that scapegoat would then go out into the wilderness, and that was a picture. Once it went over the hill, so to speak, and out of sight, then that was a notification to the people, God has accepted the sacrifice, our sin has been taken care of. Now, let's go to Hebrews chapter 9. Keep your place in Leviticus, if you haven't lost it already, but go to Hebrews chapter 9. Actually, go to chapter before we go there, go to chapter 3 first. Go to chapter 3 first. Now, one of the major points in the book of Hebrews is that Jesus is better than the Levitical priesthood. And one of the contrasts that's going to be made is that Jesus, as our high priest, did not have to do as the earthly high priests have to do, where they have to make sacrifice for their own sin first and then for the sins of the people. Jesus didn't have to do that, because he is our sin bearer. He is perfect. He's God. But it is interesting here that the parallel is made different times throughout the book of Hebrews. So just as the high priest did have to offer a sacrifice for his household. Now watch this here in chapter 3. "Wherefore, holy brethren," chapter 3, verse 1, "Wherefore, holy brethren, partakers of the heavenly calling, consider the apostle and high priest of our profession, Christ Jesus, who is faithful to him that appointed him, as also Moses was faithful in all his house. For this man was counted worthy of more glory than Moses, inasmuch as he who had builded the house hath more honor than the house. For every house is builded by some man, but he that built all things is God. And Moses verily was faithful in all his house, as a servant, for a testimony of those things which were to be spoken after." Now watch verse 6. "But Christ as a son over his own house," whose house are who? We. "If we hold fast the confidence and rejoicing of the hope from unto the end." So the parallel here is, just as that high priest made a sacrifice for his household, we're the household that Jesus, as the high priest, made a sacrifice for. Now, let's go to chapter 9. Chapter 9. Kind of walk through this quickly here. Verse 1, then verily the first covenant, talking about the old covenant, the covenant of the law, verily the first covenant had also ordinances of divine service in a worldly sanctuary. There was the tabernacle made, the first, wherein was the candlestick and the table and the showbread, which is called the sanctuary. And after the second veil, the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all, or the holy of holies, which had the golden censer, the ark of the covenant, overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot that had manna, Aaron's rod that budded, the tables of the covenant. And over it, the cherubim of glory, shadowing the mercy seat, of which we cannot now speak particularly. Now, when these things were thus ordained, the priest went always into the first tabernacle, accomplishing the service of God. But into the second went the high priest alone once every year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for the errors of the people. So there we have both ideas being mentioned. So the bull was for himself, the goat was offered for the people. The Holy Ghost thus signifying that the way into the holiest was not yet made manifest, while the first tabernacle was yet standing, which was a figure for the time then present, in which were offered both gifts and sacrifices, that could not make him that did the service perfect as pertained to the conscience. So that's talking about their salvation. Those things did not actually accomplish salvation, which did only in meats and drinks and diverse washings and carnal ordinances imposed on them until the time of Reformation. But Christ, being come an high priest of good things to come, by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building, neither by the blood of goats and calves. So you see the two different animals there. He is speaking particularly here about the Day of Atonement and this whole work of the Day of Atonement. What verse was I on? Verse 12. Neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood he entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. For if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of an heifer, sprinkling the unclean, sanctified to the purifying of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from dead works for the living and true God? And for this cause he is the mediator of the New Testament, that by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first testament, they which are called might receive promise of eternal inheritance. Let's drop down here to verse 23. It was therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ is not entered into the holy place made with hands, which are the figure of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. So he's making the parallel here, just as in the Old Testament, the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies to offer that blood on the mercy seat and to stand in the presence of God on behalf of the people. That's what Christ is doing right now as he stands in heaven before the Father to make intercession for us. That's what he's doing. His presence in heaven is the perfect sacrifice. He is there and doesn't need the blood of bulls and goats and stuff like that to go in there. Now watch what he says. Verse 25. Nor yet that he should offer himself often, as the high priest entereth into the holy place every year with blood of others, for then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now once in the end of the world hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And as it is appointed to men once to die, but after this the judgment, so Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many. Now watch this. And unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. So he's making the parallel here. Just as that high priest, he would go into the tabernacle, he would offer that blood, then he would come back out of the tabernacle to appear before the people again, and it was at that point it's revealed to the people that their sin has been taken care of by that sacrifice that he had already made, and they would offer the scapegoat. The parallel here is that when Jesus Christ comes back, so has Israel, to this point, been redeemed? Has all Israel been saved yet? No. Are they going to be? Yes. Romans chapter 11. So all Israel shall be saved. Now, has their sin been paid for already? Yes. They just don't know it yet. So when Christ appears the second time without sin unto salvation, then, just like that high priest would let that scapegoat go out into the wilderness as a object lesson for the people, your sin has been taken care of, it's been separated from you. Israel then, when Jesus returns, will realize he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. Isaiah 53 is all about the second coming and Israel's recognition that Jesus is their Messiah. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. They will cry out in that day that he did that for us. That's him. He's the guy, and we missed him. But now we realize that's who it is. Now, notice back here, Leviticus 16. We'll finish up here. Leviticus 16. And so the Lord will appear the second time for the people of Israel who are presently waiting for their Messiah. It is at that point they will be cleansed, and they will then enter into their rest. That's the theme in Hebrews chapter 4. Now notice here, chapter 16 of Leviticus, verse 29. So after all this with the Day of Atonement, it says, "And this shall be a statute forever unto you, that in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, ye shall afflict your souls." That means fast, is what that's referring to. "And do no work at all, whether it be one of your own country, or a stranger or a sojourner among you. For on that day shall the priest make an atonement for you, to cleanse you, that ye may be clean from all your sins before the Lord. It shall be a Sabbath of" what? Rest unto you, and ye shall afflict your souls by a statute forever. And the priest, whom he shall anoint, and whom he shall consecrate to minister in the priest's office in his father's stead, shall make the atonement, and shall put on the linen clothes, even the holy garments. And he shall make an atonement for the holy sanctuary, and he shall make an atonement for the tabernacle of the congregation, and for the altar, and he shall make an atonement for the priest, and for all the people of the congregation. And this shall be an everlasting statute unto you, to make an atonement for the children of Israel for all their sins once a year. And he did as the Lord commanded Moses. So he says there, you'll go through this. You'll go through this whole atonement thing, and then you will enter into a period of rest. And that's the parallel here. So this last paragraph here real quick, and then we're done. The placement of the instruction of the Day of Atonement is perfectly set at the end of the first section of Leviticus. The first section deals with how we approach God, and there is no way to approach God apart from sacrifice. Then the second section, that will begin next week, Lord willing, of Leviticus, deals with how we walk with God. How we walk with God on a daily basis. And you can't walk with God apart from a relationship with him. And that's what's established in the first 16 chapters. How do we have a relationship with God? And then how do we walk with God in the rest of the book? Any questions on any of that? How about from this section over here? All right, you're dismissed.